Yes, Spurs fans, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to the Irish Hotspur. We are going to be looking back on the great win against Everton, take some conclusions, take some sort of talking points from that game. Thomas Frank definitely was going into that one with a bit of pressure, but he answered the call and I think has answered a few questions and hopefully has gathered some momentum and some confidence ahead of arguably the toughest test, in my opinion, that he's ever going to face this season, at least so far, and that's against Newcastle tomorrow. And it's a great chance for us to go further in the cup. We know that Ange Postecoglou was able to finish the season with a trophy, but the domestic campaign definitely was not one to really be fond of. But he did finish off with a trophy. Can Thomas Frank carry on that momentum going into this season? We have a huge panel here. We have two lovely men from Ireland who are making their debut, and of course, James from Spurs Related. James, good to have you back with us. And then we have Colin and a fellow Jack here. Another Jack finally joins the panel. We're going to make the best use of their times tonight, everybody. So please do get into the chat and ask us any questions. If you want to support the channel any further, you're welcome to become a member. I did put in a members question in the post section of the YouTube channel page, so look out for that because we will reserve a bit of time at the end to answer some of those. At least Dave and I definitely will. Good to see some people joining in here. Let's make the best use of people's time tonight. We are going to ask a bit of a funny one just to warm ourselves up here because Sonny, he's been speaking about Spurs, about maybe not getting the opportunity to really say goodbye to the Spurs fans at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. He was saying that he had to only say goodbye, of course, in Korea on the preseason tour. He's ripping it up in the MLS as he finished off the season with 9 goals and 3 assists in only 10 appearances and has been linked for the move maybe back to us in January just to sort of stay warmed up ahead of the World Cup. Go to you first on this one, James. Would you take Sonny back on a loan until the end of the season while the MLS is, I think, in a bit of a off-season bit?
Yeah, good to be on, lads. Thanks for having me back. Yeah, on the Sonny one, I just find it incredible that it's even being linked. If I'm being deadly honest, I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion. I haven't actually checked social media too much on this, and obviously it seems like a perfect stopgap in a way. But I mean, let's be honest. Like having a player for 1 or 2 months while they're essentially at another club, not only will his focus not be on Tottenham, it will be almost like a testimonial for a few games. It's just not the kind of player we need. And let's be honest, Son's form went absolutely downhill in the last 2 seasons. And I'm one of Son's biggest fans. Like, I love the guy, but to sort of even suggest this, I think he's absolutely crazy. If I'm being honest, Jack, I don't see him going anywhere. I think he'll just take the preseason off and wait to go back with LAFC for the new season, I believe, in MLS, which is in the end of February or March. But I mean, like, I can't even believe we're suggesting this. Like, fair play if he wants to come and say bye. I get that. You know, he didn't really get the farewell that he probably deserved. But you know, come for one of the games before and go around the pitch and clap or something. You don't need to come back in a Spurs shirt for 4 games and sort of run about like you sort of half-assed. Like for me, it doesn't make sense. I don't know how everyone else is feeling, but I just don't think this should be happening at all.
Go to the guy next to you, Colin. Good to have you with us. Would you take Sonny back almost like we took Gareth Bale back for a little bit of time?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be here. Yeah, I probably would take him back. I understand the sentiment that it might be a bit of a long goodbye, and why would you take a player back just to allow him to say goodbye? But for me, at the moment, if we weren't going to get Kulu back, or we weren't going to get Maddison back or whatever, I don't think it would be a bad idea to have somebody of the caliber that Sonny has. I appreciate that his form probably wasn't what it should have been towards the end of his Spurs career, but he was probably short of a yard of pace. But if you were to play him slightly further back at the top of the midfield, perhaps he could do something to unlock. We just seem so blocked in the final third that it might be good to have somebody that is clever enough to maybe unlock some of those defenses. Having said that, we are the joint league top scorers at the moment. So, but I would welcome him back. Club legend, certainly a good player, and hopefully with the run of form he's had in the MLS, he could continue it here.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, to you, Jack, we do have issues in the left wing area. I mean, would you take someone like Sonny back to help fill that problem?
I think it'd be a nice idea, but at the same time, I don't think it's overly practical, to be honest. I think just you're probably better off. He got the perfect end and he got win the Europa League. If he comes back and plays maybe, 7-8 matches, doesn't look like himself, you kind of have a bad memory of Sonny finishing off. I think sometimes you just need to leave that chapter closed. I think we have a bit of an issue as a club. I think of looking back, it's like I think we all would love Harry Kane back. I think that's just Harry Kane's still Harry Kane. But I think like Bale coming back was obviously good, but even up until last summer, people saying, "Oh, we need to bring Pochettino back." I just think sometimes you need to move on and find the next Sonny. Maybe you find some 23, 24-year-old fella who will come in and do it for the next 10 years like Sonny. And I think also, I don't know if there's registration issues if you want to include him in the Champions League squad. I think, I think you're allowed to make 3 changes after Christmas. So if you're assuming that Kulusevski comes back in, that's one of the changes. Any other signs you want to make, that's another change. And maybe, I don't know, if Dragusin maybe finds a bit of form, you probably want to bring him in just as an extra centre-back option, because we only have 3 centre-backs really. I know Ben Davies is there, but you don't really want to be playing him. So I think those 3 spots are probably taken, to be honest. I just don't think it's overly practical.
I mean, Dave, I've seen rumors of him wanting to, and it's probably going to happen, he's going to come back during his time off and say goodbye to the Spurs fans in a testimonial type of manner, maybe during the North London Derby, or I don't know, just when it suits him to wave goodbye and be there in the stadium and get his proper send-off. But I haven't seen anything about him actually making a move back to Spurs. So what would you take it? Would you be willing to take it, even in a dreamlike scenario?
Look, for me, I think you look at it, right? The reason why that sort of rumors come about is because we haven't filled his position. You know, it's a huge problem down that left-hand side. No matter who we play down there, there's no end product. So you're constantly, maybe because the break is happening in the MLS, and, you know, there's the opportunity to be able to bring some back here, all of a sudden Spurs fans are thinking about. And look, I'd understand. I think he's got, 9 goals, 3 assists inside 10 games, you know, so he's absolutely ripping up there. And you would argue that maybe if he got into some of the positions or was afforded the time and space that Udebert was afforded, that he probably would be able to put in a better cross or just have that bit of more quality in the final third. However, I sort of agree with Jack there. I mean, look, if he does come back, there's no room to put him into the Champions League squad. You know, Matisse Teller's already been left out because of it, and other players will be coming back from injury who, you know, you would think that Thomas Frank would probably like to add, maybe especially Kulusevski's case, back in there. So the squad numbers just ain't there to allow it. And I just think it's a fanciful idea. You know, the problem is, you know, we wanted to get rid of Son. We wanted to get rid of Kane. Now, all of a sudden, we're calling for them to come back and fix the problems. But the reality is they're not getting any younger. They're only getting older. So, you know, when you bring them back, and we've seen it when, you know, Gareth Bale come back, it's never really as good as the first time around. And for me, I don't think it suits Son. And Son has made no indication that he wants to come back. I think the only indication is that he would like to, you know, say a proper goodbye to the Spurs fans, because his last game was out in Korea, and then it sort of happened. So, you know, I think that's the only thing around it. But Spurs fans are taking it one step back, one step further, because we're dying for someone to fill that left wing void. But I'm sorry, I don't think Son's the answer moving forward.
I don't think he's the answer either. And also, if they really were to show ambition, the new Lewis family, I think bringing someone like Sonny back is more of something like maybe Levy would pull off, or just sort of like a temporary plug-in, not something that you would imagine they'd be doing if they're investing hundreds of millions of extra pounds into the transfer kitty and that type of thing. Like, it seems like that's a Levy move more than a move that they would seemingly make.
It doesn't show ambition. Like, you look at all the intent that the Lewis family have put out there so far, and the communications they put out there through Vinay, you know, and they've backed it up by putting 100 million into the club and stuff like that, you know, and they're speaking about wanting to go on and, you know, challenge for trophies and stuff like that. You know, bringing some back to fill a void that they were happy to let him leave doesn't exactly stink of ambition moving forward. It almost feels like just a stopgap sort of situation again. So for me, I think it's very important in terms of the Lewis family, if they want to gain buy-in from the Spurs fans, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of Spurs fans like me that, you know, aren't just blindly giving them faith and trust. At the end of the day, they have to prove it. They were still a part of the 22 years, you know, that Levy was here and stuff, or the 24 years that Daniel Levy was here and stuff like that. So, you know, if they bring back Son, it does almost just feel like a stopgap, and it feels like you're sort of continuing on the same trend that we had for the last 24 years.
100% agree. John Stokes, thank you for 44 months of support, sir. He's saying evening, Dave, Jack, James, and Colin, double Jack attack. And thank you as well, John, for reposting a lot of our stuff on X. I've noticed recently. Been very, very kind to us there. And of course, very kind with the longevity of your support, sir. Good to have you in here with us. Cantab making a comment of replacing Son with Son, kind of like how what Colin mentioned earlier, replacing Kane with Kane. It just seems like, I don't know, just one of those things where I think the other Jack also mentioned that replacing Kane with Kane. It's just one of those things with Spurs that I think we just need to move on from. Find a younger Sonny, like someone maybe mentioned earlier. And good to see K32 in the house as well, Kieran, and well as Jason Bell joining us here. Going to move on to a funny question that I noticed actually when Dave and I were doing a Twitter Reacts over the weekend. And I think this just is from football fans in general, fans upset with Arsenal, fans upset with Spurs, and just the game in general with Brentford doing these long throws. Lots of fans I noticed on Twitter have spoken, if not complained about, how much set pieces are becoming a major part of the game. Lots of them were complaining about it, not praising it. There's even a question about set piece coach cams happening in the North London derby between the two Spurs set piece coaches. Is this an example of games gone, James, or do you not really mind actually how much set pieces are being prioritized in football?
Do you know, I saw a bit of a meltdown on Twitter as well. I think, yeah, he comes on our channel quite a lot. Kish from Lily White Lab, he kind of explained it as, we're winning, but it's also boring and the Premier League is in a dark place. And to some extent, I think about that and I think, I do agree with it. And like naturally, for the neutral, especially when you watch a game of football, you want to see free-flowing attacking football, lots of chances, lots of attacks, lots of take-ons. And at the moment, it does very much seem like a bit of a chess match in a lot of these Premier League games. But then I think about it further, and I think that is just probably down to the fact that the Premier League is more competitive than it's ever been. So you rewind like 15 years and you got like Man United absolutely dominating and players like Ronaldo and Rooney just taking on players and making it look easy, even if you go back only like sort of 10 years to like the likes of Eden Hazard, who was absolutely exceptional at that. There's very few players like that, which is why Tottenham are so lucky to have a player in the sense of like Mohamed Kudus, who takes on his player. I feel like there's less players like that, which makes it more of a chess match, which makes it more of a game about set pieces where it's not about taking on a player and putting in a cross. It's about winning a corner or winning a throw-in, which seems to be the thing that Tottenham and Brentford especially are doing this season, and creating chances that way by loading the box and putting in a dangerous delivery. And I think that is the reason why people see it as a change for the worse. It's because it's so competitive. It's because defensively teams have got better, and it's because every game is close. Like I don't think you can call many Premier League games anymore. Whereas back in the day, you'd go, yeah, that's a dead cert win for Man United, or that's a dead cert win for Tottenham. Now you can't tell. And I think that's why teams are looking to set pieces much more nowadays.
No, that's a great answer towards the end there. I agree. I think it's no longer, what did they call it? The cartel six, or top six. It's no longer a thing anymore. It's like 15 teams that you have to worry about.
Exactly. I think the problem's twofold though. I think, one, there's a lack of mavericks in the game, real skillful players in the game now. The product on offer now, football on offer now is very bland. It doesn't matter what level you watch it at. It's all more or less the same. Recycling possession. You're getting wingers passing the ball backwards. The centre-backs have the most touches of any player on the football pitch. Traditionally what would be your most sort of least technical players have the most touches on the ball and stuff like that. But also, the bar for a free kick is so low now. Naturally, it's just turned into a set piece game. I mean, I think you're seeing managers now know that they're dealing with a severe lack of quality. We see that with the amount of players on our books, and we can't even get one decent left winger between a lot of them. I think you're just naturally seeing managers go, okay, well, to circumvent a way around it, let's just go more direct. Look, at the end of the day, set corner kicks were always the bread and butter for any team, defending them and attacking them. You could always pick up at least 5 to 10 goals a year from set pieces going forward. And once you keep clean sheets defensively, traditionally, you'd end up going and winning games and stuff like that. So for me, it's the more the change is more about the long throw. But that's just, again, circumventing, why would they throw it in, watching their players pass it side to side, horseshoe football, when they can just navigate that and go, right, put them straight under pressure. And I just think naturally the lack of quality, more or less now, the players that they're selecting to come through, they have to cover 100 yards in like 0.2 seconds. They have to be 6 foot odd. They have to be physically strong. They're not really being picked or selected on their talent anymore. Like, I'm not being funny. The game I'm watching now compared to where I grew up, when I just take the Brazil team as an example, the lack of technical ability is absolutely shocking this day and age across the board. It's more about how much of an athlete you are rather than the skill that you possess on the football. But you don't see a David Bentley or a David Beckham anymore, players that can whip the ball around the pitch like that and stuff like that. So for me, I think it's twofold. quality of player, but also, you know, the bar of free kicks is so low now. It's naturally just turning the game into a sterile version of just set pieces. Who's the best at them? That's why there's no coincidence Tottenham and Arsenal are near the top of the league, and both are absolutely unbelievable from set pieces.
Colin, would you go as dark as Dave there? Is the game being ruined? By
The game's gone. The game's gone. Yes and no. It's for me, it's a bit cyclical. I think form or functionality is kind of overriding a great term that Dave used there, the Mavericks. So yeah, when I was growing up and you'd watch Ronaldo and Rooney just tearing up the pitch, or even going even further back in Ginola, watching him tearing up a pitch. It doesn't seem to work anymore because obviously players are so fit. You can get 2 or 3 players around these guys now, and they're also fit enough to cover another 20 yards to go and do the same kind of hunting in packs that you see a lot of teams doing now. So a lot of that is gone. But my dad always said this to me when he would come down and watch Spurs with me. He's a Leeds fan, and when Leeds were in the Championship, my dad would always insist the Championship was a better product because he would say the Premier League is a chess match. He would always say that it's just a chess match, a bit boring. The Championship is where it's at because it's a bit more helter-skelter, a bit more ping-pong. So I'm up for this kind of long throw, set piece kind of thing because it does add jeopardy. You can't tell where the ball is going to be. If it's a very kind of Manchester City setup and you've got all these angles and you've got somebody like Kevin De Bruyne back in his heyday pulling the strings, it's all about the angles, all about the runs. Kind of very predictable. Teams get pulled apart. Now, like, imagine Mickey van de Ven going up to Everton and scoring 2 headers. Like, it's from set pieces. It's just unheard of. This reminds me of, and I think it will get more exciting as time moves on. It reminds me of the Jack Charlton Ireland team of the 90s. Put them under pressure. So instead of taking a short throw to recycle possession, put it in the box and create chaos. And I tell you what, I'm all here for it, especially if we walk out 3-0 winners against Everton. I appreciate one of them was from play, which is what Spurs always do to you. I was sitting on the couch 2-0 up, moaning that we hadn't scored from play. And then they go up the pitch and they score the third one from play, which was very irritating.
The only thing I'd say, Colin, on that is if we didn't win that game 3-0, would your opinion be different? Because that's the argument I've been having with people. Like, would you still be like, don't mind that kind of football if we don't churn out the results in the way we did on Sunday?
Probably not. Context is absolutely everything. I 100% agree with that. So walking out 3-0 gives you the rose-tinted glasses. You look back and you say, yeah, that's fantastic. I have to say, during the match, I was upset. I was saying this today before we came live. I still fail to see how Thomas Frank is pulling this all together. I think there's a functional defensive unit because obviously this is the second best defensive record in the league. I can't see how midfield works. Playing Paulinho and playing Bentancur together just does my head in. And then I can't see any functionality in the front, even though, having said that, we're joint league top scorers. So it's all a bit of a mess, a higgledy-piggledy mess. But as an observer, you can't quite see the flow yet. So yes, context is everything. 3-0, you take it all day long. First, a lot of context there. The first defeat for Everton at their new stadium as well. So, great for Spurs. We walk out with our heads held high. But yeah, I agree with you. If that's a dour 0-0 and all those opportunities go the wrong side of the posts or over the crossbar, you're frustrated because there was nothing entertaining to watch. But like we've had 3 occasions to say yes. But, if there's none of that, you're just sitting there going, this is shocking.
I think when it comes to Thomas Frank and Tottenham specifically, though, when it comes to like being more direct from set pieces and stuff like that, I think there has to be an understanding from the Spurs fan base. When you're dealing with a lack of quality up front, a lack of quality off the left wing, and no matter who we've brought in to play Cam, that's 3 of your front 4 that are sort of, poor standard, nowhere near up to scratch, can barely control the ball when it's put to them. You've got Brennan Johnson, who's always looking to pass backwards, for example. Xavi Simons, too lightweight. Frank, what do you want Frank to do? Sort of try and persist with it like Ange Postecoglou, or also try and circumvent another way around to be able to go and get us goals? And at the end of the day, the throw-ins in the corners have been a great, useful resource to Thomas Frank at the end of the day. And I think it will help him, maintain and put points on the board where Postecoglou failed last year, because Postecoglou tried to play football. We didn't have the players to do it, but we weren't great at set pieces. We didn't really have any other avenue or any look like there was anything we were really working on to try and circumvent a way around it to try and compete. At least Thomas Frank is doing something. The one thing, the big thing, asked the Postecoglou, Conte and even Jose in years gone by is, well, what are you going to do about it? We understand there's a lack of quality, but what are you going to do about it? And at least Thomas Frank is trying. So when it comes to Tottenham specifically, of course, we all want to play that sexy football. But in years gone by, we've always had 2 or 3 Mavericks in the team. We've only got 1 right now, and that's where your problem lies. And that's why we are seeing Tottenham rely on set pieces, rely on long throws. Because I'm not being funny. Last year, we watched horseshoe football. Thomas Frank doesn't want that. It's like, well, I'm not sitting here and going to offer the Spurs fans the same. Let's just go along direct, put them under pressure. If there's a lack of quality, this is another way around it. So I think, in that regard, I think, Thomas Frank deserves a little bit of respect.
Dave, do you also think that Thomas Frank has almost accepted that there's a lack of quality within the squad, and so he's had to go with these tactics and sort of crawl to January with a slightly different style of football to then get to January and then address some of those issues?
Of course, well, look, it's also, Kulusevski coming back will help. Mwani now coming to fitness will help. You've seen the impact he's had over the last 2 games. It's just simple things. When the ball comes into him, he can hold it up. He can relieve pressure. He can get turned, take it up the pitch, win free kicks. He can link up with others. I've nearly cried the last 2 games watching him. I haven't seen anyone being able to link up with anybody since Harry Kane. And I think for me, the more quality players you have, the better. Like, you listen to Thomas Frank, what he said about Mwani in the interview just before the game. He said, I'm happy and Spurs fans be really happy because he knows the quality of the guy and the quality really matters, and he will make us look a bit better. Okay, against Everton, we weren't amazing, but there was a lovely bit of link-up play between him, Xavi Simons and Kudos, and that's something that maybe you can build off and work off. It's just going to take time, and I think right now, you look at Mikel Arteta, for instance, he lives off set pieces. They brought him in more quality fair players, and at some point they're going to open up and start playing football when the easier fixtures come around. But at the end of the day, if we want to get there, this is a way to keep us competitive until we bring in them players.
And it's hard to complain too, because we have scored more open play goals than even Arsenal have this season. But yet Arsenal are at the top of the table. And to the quality point that James asked Dave about, I mean, a good example would be like, I think a manager does kind of live and die by, if they are going to play entertaining football, they still do live and die by actually having quality enough players. Because Vincent Kompany, right, spent like $100+ million on players when he was at Burnley. Burnley were one of the worst teams to watch when he was in the Premier League. But then all of a sudden he moves to Bayern, and then the football improved tremendously. Now he looks like a good manager, but probably the real reason was maybe the tactics were good, but it is down to still having quality enough players to execute what you're asking of them. But Thomas Frank is a guy, because he's spent his time in the doldrums of the Championship as well as also in the Premier League, being a mid-table team. He's worked with, let's say, lesser quality players before, and then knows how to get a fine tune out of them. And maybe he's just doing that at Spurs. It's probably just hard for us to accept, because we would imagine that Spurs would have a lot better quality players than the likes of Brentford. But sadly, maybe we don't.
I think where fans get annoyed as well is that the manager isn't just honest in the press conference. But at the end of the day, I think there has to be an understanding that he's never just going to come out and say, well, look, the current options I've got are shit, so that's why I'm playing this way. He's never going to do that, because he has to rely on them. He has to manage people. That's his job at the end of the day. So he's never going to come out and say how we see it. So that's why you're always going to see him answer the questions differently. And I think that's where fans get frustrated. But, does Thomas Frank understand the need to be able to be better from open play if he wants to be able to survive at Tottenham, but also use this as a platform if he wants to stay at this sort of level of management after Tottenham? Of course he knows there's a need for it. But at the end of the day, his hands are tied right now. But he can never come out and say what we can as fans.
What about you, Jack? Is the game being ruined by set pieces?
To an extent, it is. But at the end of the day, these things are always cyclical. A lot of teams were looking to kind of play football. Like, as you referenced, Burnley were the perfect example of it. They came straight up. They were trying to play possession football, and it just doesn't work for those teams. So you probably have a bit of a gap of teams neglecting set pieces. So now other teams are actually managing to exploit that. So I think, to be honest, you have a way of playing football, and then someone like Pep was probably the biggest example of it. He came into the league, everyone tried to copy him, and pretty much everyone's just trying to copy Arteta at the moment, really. And I think, but it will come back around. And just on the game on Sunday, I thought it was a good away performance. If that was at home, I don't think it was a good performance.
Mhm.
But like Vicario pulls off two ridiculous saves he had no right to make. I think one of them was from Beto, the bicycle kick, and the other one was from Enjoy, who I think, when talking about left wingers, I think he'd be the sort of maverick you want. He has everything you want from a winger. So I think, but I think the Premier League overall, I think, is just pretty low level technically for the level that the actual sides perform at. I think you look at someone like Marco Asensio came to the league last year. Maybe not the best athletically, but he was just technically so good to watch, I think, that it kind of showed. Maybe he wouldn't be a top player in another league, but he comes to the Premier League and his technical quality is just very obvious, I thought. So I think that's just kind of, but different leagues have different strengths, really. You look at keepers come from Italy and Spain, and they can't deal with set pieces. Like Vicario's trouble from set pieces. That just wasn't an issue, really, in Italy because it's not as big of a deal. So I think just one of those things. Different leagues have different strengths and weaknesses, and they'll change over time, I guess.
I really agreed with the first part of your answer there, because I was actually going to make a similar point where I think football, we sometimes do forget, is a bit cyclical, where someone comes up with a new thing, but then it takes time for then someone else to almost find the antidote really for that. And I think what ended up happening, like you said, was Pep Guardiola came to the Premier League, really changed how the game was played. All of a sudden, everybody in a way kind of was copying Pep and was trying to play something similar, but you're not going to have as good of players as Pep Guardiola, and you're also not going to be as good of a manager doing Pep Guardiola's tactics at the end of the day. So then everybody was suffering from it, and almost it needed this switch to the dark ages type of football to then hurt someone like Pep Guardiola. You had the Thomas Franks, the David Moyes of the world that were doing just the complete opposite, really, like big long balls up top to the striker, playing really direct set pieces. That was the way to maybe hurt the Pep Guardiola teams that were looking to just have the ball for pretty much the whole match. And you think about it this way as well, like if you're playing against a team that is just going to play horseshoe football, have, possession for 60, 70% of the game, you only have so many times to then score with the ball at your feet. So you might as well take advantage of those dead ball situations. You might as well look to take advantage of moments where you do actually have the ball and not sort of just repeat what the other team is doing, kind of do something drastically different, really. And I think maybe that's what's happening now is we've kind of moved away from the Pep Guardiola tactics of football, and all of a sudden set pieces are now in vogue, so to speak. But I don't know if it's ruining the game. I just think, like you mentioned there, Jack, I think it's just the cyclical nature of football. Eventually, maybe 5-10 years from now, set pieces all of a sudden will become a bit of a thing of the past, really. But it is kind of funny to just see every single team now doing the long throw, really. But I mean, Dave, just maybe finish up on this. Do you agree? Like, why is it maybe taken so long for set pieces all of a sudden to become just so hyper focused on? Like every single, you would be foolish now to not have a set piece coach. Like Ange Postecoglou must hate the product the Premier League is at right now, with everything being set piece focused.
Yeah, like you sort of alluded to, I think teams have maybe used it as a way to try and get results against the likes of City and stuff, sort of accepting that they're going to end up sitting in for 90 minutes. But if they can break away and, get throw-ins or corner kicks, that's a way for them to be able to go and snatch a draw, be able to go and snatch the game. So I think, once teams got joy with that, you see more and more teams taking on. But at the end of the day, if you're winners, you care about every asset of the game. You scrutinize every asset of the game and, where you can improve and stuff like that. So I don't think it's anything really new. I think, if you go back to Alisson Ferguson's, they were at Man United, I'm pretty sure, they were well drilled on set pieces, defense, midfield, attack, and stuff like that, and that every sort of area of the game really matters, so that's what winners do at the end of the day. I just think at Spurs in years gone by, managers haven't really been allowed to bring in additional coaching staff because we've been restricted by budgets and everything else to be able to build the stadium and stuff like that. So we've neglected certain areas of the game. You go to any other fan bases that are used to winning, having set piece coaches and concentrating on set pieces and maximizing your output from them going forward, and also making sure you don't concede goals from them, is nothing new. That's just what winning teams do.
I actually forgot to mention this part too that Rainman says. He's saying, I think the idea that everything is going to be set pieces is overblown. The bigger part is the massive amount of low block football that is more of a cause. I actually think that was also maybe a bit of the move towards set pieces, and also the answer to the Guardiola type of style was just really focus on having compact defenses that just give up absolutely nothing and then just make the game 0-0 for 60, 70 minutes and then just look to take advantage of one or two counterattacks or set piece opportunities. I think that's what the game has become, where again, the chess piece or chess game type of metaphor, I think that's been the answer is, well, if they're going to play that way, then we'll play sort of every man behind the ball and make it as difficult on them as possible, which then has brought back the big number 9s and everything for the teams like Pep Guardiola and whatnot. I think it's actually kind of fun to watch to see how people sort of figure it out and try to, pose these problems for these bigger managers with better players. Let's kind of find as well, a bit of something on Thomas Frank and sort of his build up to this Newcastle game. Go to you on this one, Jack, because I think I've gone to you last every time. Thomas Frank said, of course, there will be a bit of rotation for the Newcastle game. He said you can't play the same 11 for every game because of the risk of injury, fatigue, levels of form dropping, etc. But should he go with the same 11 against Newcastle, knowing that we won 3-0 at Everton?
I think if we had an easier game at the weekend, I think possibly, but obviously that Chelsea game's going to be massive, and we've had a couple of years of being really bad against big 6 teams, especially in derby games against Chelsea and Arsenal. So that's one I really want to win this weekend. So I think as much as we don't want to see him out of the team, I think Kudus needs a rest. I think he looked really leggy in the second half yesterday, and I think if you keep playing him, he's going to end up like Kulusevski last season, where he's running around empty and then just gets injured and falls apart, and then you don't have him for months. So I think at some point he's going to have to get a rest, whether it's Copenhagen next week or Newcastle tomorrow. I think he's going to have to get a rest at some point. And I'd like to see Archie Gray get a chance in midfield. I think any of those short cameos he's had, I think he's looked really sharp in midfield. And maybe it's a case of where Frank doesn't think he's ready. He obviously sees more on the training pitch than us, but I think he's looked really sharp. He looked lost last season under Postecoglou in midfield, but I think he looks a lot sharper. I think, especially that was the Monaco game. I think the Bodo game. Sorry, he set up the equaliser. I think he managed to get high and wide and put a nice low ball in. So I think just his energy and just to give Bentancur, Paulinho a rest really, and then maybe get Sarr back into the team as well. I think he's been really good off the bench the last few games. Maybe get him into that second striker role, picking up those second balls. I think that's going to be very important for the game, especially somewhere like St. James's Park. It's going to be a fairly rough atmosphere. So I think it's probably going to be a scrappy win again if we're going to get a win.
Yeah, I think set pieces will probably be very vital for that game as well. But I think Archie Gray, like you said, has played well in almost every cameo. It's just when will he actually be given that start? Newcastle, I'd be a bit surprised if he were given the start against Newcastle. I wonder if he is going to go with the same midfield. Anyone can come on this. He said he's going to do rotation. Where is it going to happen?
I just want to come in on what Jack said about Kudus. Look, I definitely agree with him. You could see him, coming off the pitch the other night. He sort of looked a bit leggy, right? He looked a bit tired. But I think he has to play against Newcastle. With Newcastle, they start fast and aggressive at home. And that crowd at St. James's Park under the lights, it's one of the toughest places to go in the country. And for me, in years gone by, they've put us under severe pressure. We haven't been able to play out through them. And we've resorted to Vicario pumping it long, but no one's ever been able to hold it up. That's why Mohamed Kudus has to play. He's the only player across that front line that can actually take that ball, from different heights, it doesn't matter what power it comes at him, that can actually take that ball down. He's going to be a massive asset in terms of being able to relieve a little bit of pressure and be able to get us up the pitch. So I just think in that regard, how Newcastle usually start at home, I think it's important that he plays. Also, I think it's so important that Rodrigo, Bentancur and Paulinho are rolled out there again. At the end of the day, he's rotating them earlier on in the season. We've got a tough run of fixtures coming up. I would hope that was, looking forward to this tough run of fixtures coming up and that he's going to put them out there regularly, because I know that Archie Gray has played well. I know that Bergvall has done okay this season. But for me, I don't think you can take one of them experienced duo out of there and put one of them in. I think in terms of in possession, if you take out Bentancur, it's going to cause a huge problem because no one can keep possession like he can under pressure. And I think if you take out Paulinho, I think you have a huge problem away from home then where teams just sort of run at you. Paulinho breaks up play and turns over ball and then gets us moving. So for me, I think they have to play. I think where the change and across the back line, there's nothing really Thomas Frank can do with the amount of injuries he have. I think where the changes need to come is probably somewhere across that forward line. But I do agree with Jack. I think he has to get Papa Matasar in there. Like I've been screaming about for weeks, this guy was, he scored all of our goals pre-season. He was involved in nearly all of our goals inside the first 6 games. And I don't understand why he's took him out. He brought on Sarr the other day, Xavi Simons done nothing for 60, 70 minutes. Bergvall didn't do anything when he came on or impact the game. But Papamata Sarr did going forward. He scored the goal from open play. So for me, I think he has to squeeze him in there. But I think that Paulinho and Bentancur backwards, I think has to remain the same personally if we have any hope of winning this. I don't think it's a game that Thomas Frank can sort of, that we can lose. I think it puts pressure on Thomas Frank again, because you go by other managers that have been knocked out of this cup. Spurs fans don't like getting knocked out of the cup, especially when the managers have made changes. Spurs fans like the cups. We get really annoyed when we get knocked out. We have an affinity with cups. We have a history with cups. So for me, I think we need to go and win this. But look, we're good away from home. Thomas Frank broke the West Ham curse, broke the Everton curse. Why can't he break the Newcastle curse? But for me, I think if we want to win this and we're going to take this seriously, that sort of back 6-7 has to remain the same.
And he broke the pre-international break curse. Don't forget that one. Oh my God. Yeah, I agree with most of what you're saying there, Dave, for sure. There's definitely, we have to get somebody, in my opinion, in that will run at Newcastle. And I don't think, I completely agree with that. We can't underestimate what a task this is. They're the current holders. You know, all the usual plaudits that are rolled out when you talk about Newcastle, about what a difficult ground it is to go to, and normally not a happy hunting ground for us either. But I definitely feel that if we're going to play, I think Xavi doesn't play for me. He's probably too light. You know, like, he hasn't quite settled in just yet. I think there is a player there, but he's not doing it yet. And I think he looks to me like a guy who's just far too inside his own head now. Every time he misplaces a pass or anytime something goes wrong, his head drops. He probably needs a break. And Sarr, to me, maybe even Bergvall, is somebody that you need in to probably Sarr is a better choice, to go in and push back Newcastle, because they are going to run at us. They are going to run at us from the first minute. And I think in some cases, attack is your best form of defence. We're definitely going to need some energy there to push them back, because Paulinho and Bentancur break up play and hold the ball well, but they don't necessarily create that well. Paulinho especially, Bentancur is probably a little bit better. But we need somebody who's going to take that ball and run. And if Kudos, you know, he's getting a little low on energy, I agree, has to play too, though, I think, even if you got a solid 60 minutes or 70 minutes out of him. And if we could try and I don't envy Thomas Frank trying to put a squad together for this one. But yeah, for me, you have to get Sarr back in there, I think.
I think Sarr could definitely be the legs that you need. Watching that Fulham Newcastle game, it was actually something, I know we were complaining about the stage of football in the last question, but if you watch the Newcastle Fulham game, it was kind of reminding me of the past, where it was just sort of we attack, you attack, now you attack. It was nice back and forth, and both teams just huffing and puffing really to try to knock each other out. And probably inevitably it was going to be Newcastle, but Fulham did have a funny game with them, and I wonder if ours will be a bit similar. Going up to you, James, do you think, you know, Frank is going to make some changes, and where will he make them?
I think as much as I hate agreeing with Dave, nail on the head, he's spot on. I think this game is screaming out for Papamata Sarr. I mean, the one point that perhaps wasn't covered, I think Colin was sort of getting to it at the end there, is obviously Papamata Sarr is being more efficient offensively than Xavi Simons anyway in less time. But also a midfielder, Bruno G, Sandro Tonali and Joelinton is an absolute monster midfield. And I don't think it's just going to be a job for Paulinho and Bentancur here. I think you need another engine in there, and that is 110% Papamata Sarr, box to box. He can run forward and he can run back and help out with the other two. And I think it's going to be a massive battle between those three and the Newcastle three, who for me are probably the most underrated midfield in the Premier League. I think they're absolutely exceptional, those three together. I think they all complement each other perfectly. I think Joelinton, Sandro Tonali or Bruno G get in our midfield in a heartbeat, if you're asking me. But yeah, I think it's going to be a tough test. And I think we need Papamata Sarr's legs more than anything, as well as his offensive ability.
I just think tomorrow night, you know, it's at St. James's Park. It's about surviving the first half an hour, the pressure that they put on you. And I think we got to roll out some of our more experienced players and our better players with, you know, for the first 55, 60 minutes. And then after that, you can make substitutions and bring on the fresh legs of Gray, Bergvall and stuff like that. When the game is opened up, Xavi Simons, when players are tired, the game is opened up. He has more space and time on the ball and stuff like that. For me, I think that's what we should do personally. I think if he goes with some of the youngsters from the off, I think we're in big trouble because Newcastle will go at us very, very early from kickoff. They're the holders of this cup. Let's not forget. The crowd are going to be up for this, and the players are going to look to build off that. So the warning signs are there. I just think if Frank goes with some of the youngsters, across the back line or in the midfield, I think the warning signs are there. For me, I think, if he wants, why not go to the sort of formation we played in possession against Everton? That sort of, that 5-2-2-1. Put Papa Matasar and Bergval where he played Kudos and Simmons the other night. Because for me, the reason why I would do that is to go and put pressure on Newcastle early on so that we're not dropping deeper and deeper and deeper and just absorbing, pressure like we done out in Monaco. There has to be some sort of engagement after the ball. And I do agree with Jack, in a cup tie away from home, you do need to inject some fresh legs, some energy. But for me, I think where you could put Bergval and Sarr in is where Kudos and Xavi played it as the 2 number 10s the other day and just push Kudos back out onto the right-hand side. I think that should be an option for Thomas Frank, because I agree with Colin and James that Newcastle midfield is absolutely exceptional. You've got Tonali, who would hit a midget stick from 60 yards away in possession. You've got Bruno Gomes, who not only can play, but he gets stuck in. And Joe Linton is a handful as well. And we have to try and stifle that midfield. So if you put Bergval and Sarr in there, they can also track back to help Bentancur and Paulini as well, if needs be. And they'll do more defensive work than, say, what Xavi Simmons would do if he was playing there. So for me, if we can stifle that midfield, absorb the early pressure, make it a battle, come out on top, then you can bring on some of your youngsters later on to go off and kill Newcastle. That's the way I would be approaching it anyway, personally. I know we've got Chelsea on the weekend, but, as many fans have said with previous managers, each game at a time.
Okay. Jack, Wayne Bonner said this year. I think it's very different to what maybe Dave thinks, but I'm curious where you are about the cup versus the league. It'd be nice to beat Newcastle, but for now, the league is more important, especially with the games we have coming up. Are you prioritizing Newcastle more or the Chelsea game?
I think after last season, I think the league has to take priority. I think we're building something bigger than last season, where it was we have to end this with a trophy. We got over not winning a trophy for 17 years. I think getting top 5 this year, I presume top 5 again, we'll get Champions League. I think that would be massive. It gives you probably a big budget to spend. Hopefully, the Lewis family pump in maybe another 50, 100 million in the summer on top of the 100 million they've done already. And you're talking about building a real good team then. I think the financial side is obviously very important, as much as we'd love to win a cup. And I think you still have the FA Cup to come around. And it's not to say with 3 or 4 changes we can't beat them. I think they'll probably make changes as well, because 2 years ago they played in Champions League and they, similar to us last season, they just had tons of injuries. And I think they're going to have to probably manage their squad as well. And they won this last season, so maybe they're going to say, look, we'll prioritise maybe having a Champions League run this year. But I think keep it fresh, but maybe don't make too many changes. I think 2 or 3 changes, maybe 4 at most, is probably ideal. But we've small enough squad available to us at the moment, with guys still coming back. If Udogie and Romero were fully fit, I think you're able to make a few more changes. But obviously, we don't have that luxury at the moment. So I think, just as Dave said, keep it tight for the first half an hour. I think if you leave space in behind, you're talking Gordon, and I don't know who will play off the right, whether it be Murphy or Alanga who will play off the right. You can't leave space in behind for those guys. They'll kill you with pace, especially if you play anything close to what Ange played. You saw what happened. We lost 4-0 there, I think, a couple of years ago. Yeah. Under Ange, you can't leave any space for them to run into, just with the pace that they have. So I think, keep it compact the first half an hour. If you can get to 60 minutes level, you have a real good chance at winning the game. Bring on fresh legs. You have plenty of forwards there on the bench. I presume Colin Mwani won't start again after just literally his first proper game. I think he'll probably come off the bench. So I think, just keep it tight and then maybe try and kill them the last half an hour.
We also
got a mistake though to leave Colin Mwani on the bench, after the good game he had.
I just think you have to manage him though. I think just he didn't really have a proper preseason, so I think just the last thing he wants him getting injured again after only just coming back from the longest dead leg I've ever heard of. But
we also got slapped up there 6-1 under Stellini, I think, as well, didn't we? They sort of Google Reese came off at halftime. So the warning signs are there how difficult this task is going to be. But Jack, just a quick question, sort of back to you. Can Thomas Frank afford to prioritise, a competition or one over the other, because is that not why people sort of got frustrated with Postecoglou last year? Is that not why people got frustrated with Jose Mourinho at times and Conte at times? Because their team selections sort of almost said, oh, look, I'm deprioritizing this competition and facing, prioritizing this competition, and Spurs fans have sort of been in uproar in years gone by when that's happened, because at the end of the day, we want to win trophies, and big clubs, they don't sort of prioritize one after another. They look to attack every opportunity that's given to them.
Yeah, I think obviously you have to prioritize. I'm not saying to play Williams, Barnett, and Byfield. I think bringing in guys like Sarr, like I think Sarr's actually earned a start. I don't think that's about resting Javi or resting Kudus, or Kudus maybe rest, but Javi certainly I wouldn't be saying to rest him. I just think getting him comfortable playing the team. I thought he actually picked up a couple of nice pockets of space. He was just missing the bit of end product there at the weekend. I think there's parts of games where you can see his quality, but yeah, I think Sarr and I do think Bentancur played well at the weekend, but I thought the few games before that, I thought he was really poor, to be honest. I thought I'm sure probably some of you have seen the graphic of his passing map from the Villa game. I don't think he completed one forward pass. I think having someone else in the midfield there, maybe, obviously Newcastle's a tough place to go. You want someone with a calm head, and as much as I'm not the biggest fan of Bentancur, he does retain possession really well, even if it's to the detriment of getting the ball up the pitch. I think maybe it is good to have him in there, but yeah, I just think keeping it fresh. Maybe, I guess Johnson's fresh enough anyway, so you could probably keep him in the team, but maybe getting Odebear back into the team. He had a rest in midweek. I thought he did well against Monaco. I think he's kind of growing with every performance. He's still missing that maybe bit of quality you expect in the final third, but he is only 20 and he had a very bad injury last season. He obviously missed, I think, 4 or 5 months with that hamstring injury. So I think if you can keep him getting a bit of rhythm going, I think that would be good, because I think, obviously, as we said, the left wing's an issue. And I think once Udogie's back, I think that relationship he was forming with them, I think in the Brighton and Leeds game you saw it, the amount of times he played that ball down the line that maybe someone like Brennan Johnson just isn't capable of playing. I think that's a good weapon to have when you have an overlapping fullback. But yeah, I think that's probably one for the next few weeks when we have everyone back fit again.
Okay. Colin, what do you take this question? So Frank must win at Newcastle, must beat Chelsea at home, and must beat Copenhagen as well, all while using the same squad because our backups just aren't good enough. That's 3 games in 7 days. I think he's maybe pointing out a bit of contradiction, maybe where we're saying the squad isn't good enough, but he also needs to win these next 3 games.
Yeah, so I suppose it's just the life of being a football fan, never mind a Spurs fan. You want to win every game. I think practically that's probably not possible. You'd obviously wish for it. Yeah, I suppose it just depends which side. When you flip that coin, Cup versus League, which side does it fall on for you? For me, it's Cup. I think you could probably afford to lose in the league, even though it pains me to say it. But yeah, the Newcastle game for me is a must-win. I want to stay in that competition. I had a taste of silverware last year. I'm in my late 40s now. We didn't get to taste much of it. Last year's Cup was amazing. I want that again. I do want us to be a force. I understand it takes time. To get knocked out at this stage, I think would be just be disappointing. We did invest in the squad in the summer. I appreciate that Frank is still finding his way. To say it's a must-win is probably difficult. I don't like to speak in black and whites. I'd love to win it, and I would hope that they all have the same mentality to go and win it. And I think we can win it. I can't emphasize how much I feel that Romero is such a loss for this game. He would fight every one of the 55,000 Newcastle fans on his own. So I think he's a real miss. But not to get back to the kind of Newcastle preview, to stick with the question. So that's the one I want to win. And that's the one, if there is a must to be put on it, that's the one I want. That's the must, right? For Chelsea, then, I wouldn't want to lose. All I really want to avoid is the derailment of every bloody season we've had recently, where they've managed to, they just seem to get under our skin. Yeah. They managed to put nails under our fingernails and torture us, and we take weeks to recover. Now, I'm optimistic Frank will find a way. I don't want to win that game. I just don't want to lose. I really don't want to lose. So if I had to take a loss in the Newcastle game and take a draw in the Chelsea game, I'll take it. But I just don't want to lose. I really don't. I mean, again, like I said at the start, everything's context. And then the Copenhagen one is so far down the line for me. you'd like to keep that unbeaten record in the Champions League. So if there's one I have to lose, I'll lose that one. I'll take a draw. You know what I mean? Like, I'll take a draw against Chelsea all day long. I really want it.
For me, though, to SOF's comment here, I mean, but that's what's expected at a big club. You know, at the end of the day, you're expected. You're going to have big games back to back. You know, it's not Brentford he's managing anymore. It's Tottenham Hotspur. The demands and the pressure are there. Look, is it unrealistic, you know, to think that we're going to win all three? Yeah, probably it is, you know. But I think the big thing is, at least we just want to be competitive, I suppose, in these fixtures. When we've had big games back to back before under other managers, you know, you go back to Postecoglou's first season, the last sort of 7-8 games, we had a relentless sort of fixture schedule. We just weren't even competitive in them. At least if we're competitive in these games and they're tight games, I think calm heads will sort of prevail coming out of them. Even if worst case scenario we don't win, you know, Newcastle or Chelsea, I think calm heads will prevail. I just think the main thing is we've got to be competitive in them and just not sort of washed away like we've been in years gone by in these sort of fixtures. But for me, that's just the demands of being at a big club like Tottenham Hotspur. Like I said, you know, these big games come around back to back, and you've got to be able to handle them. Look, yeah, obviously we've got injuries, and maybe it's a bit unrealistic to put them sort of pressures demands, but that's what comes with the job. And he signed on the dotted line at the end of the day. And look, I think for me, you've got to go strong against Newcastle, especially from the off. Make changes in the second half. Rest some players then ahead of the 5:30 kickoff on Saturday, and then Copenhagen. Rest everybody if you want. I don't care. I'm not being funny, but we should be able to rotate the squad and beat Copenhagen. If we can't, then, you know, we're just not. Champions League just isn't for us this year. It's not where we're at that level. But, you know, the domestic campaign, you know, in terms of the cup, it's Carabao Cup represents our best chance of winning silverware. And in the league, you know, we want to try and get back into Champions League if we can next year and build upon some of the signs we made this summer. So for me, domestic campaign right now takes precedent. In the Copenhagen game, you just roll out your Brennan Johnsons and Udebirds. And I mean, if they're not good enough to break them down, then there's your answer. Sell them on.
Yeah, probably. I think he probably has two curses that he has to break. He has to break the Newcastle curse tomorrow, and then he has to break the Chelsea curse. He's it's gonna like a Spurs horror cruxes that he's dealing with, Harry Potter style. But I feel like if he gets
the right time of year,
yeah, really, he's smashed most of them so far. So fair play. I think he probably would do well by beating Newcastle, getting to the next round, because then we do start to get the taste of maybe we can go far in this competition, and also then you're knocking out one of the big favorites because there are only so many teams left after that stage. And then, like you say there, Colin, like if he just doesn't lose to Chelsea and we just don't get absolutely blown out the park like we have so many times before, where you're seeing, you know, 3-point lane and all that sort of thing being shouted, I think we could probably just dust ourselves off after that, really. And then the tricky part is that with all the points that we picked up in the Champions League, but not many 3 points so far, you do kind of have to win that Copenhagen game to give yourself that leg and making sure that you qualify for the later rounds. So it is just a very, very tough week for Thomas Frank ahead, and we'll see how he handles it, really. He said that Romero, right, is on the grass, but he didn't allude to him being available. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, well, I don't think he alluded that, you know, he never gave any indication that Romero and Udogie would be selected. Look, he very well could very well sort of throw them out there. But for me, I think he'd be wise to hold them back for Chelsea. You know, that way he can give Jed Spence a rest or Pedro Porro a rest. You know, he can bring Romero back in. He can maybe take out Danzo if needs be and put Romero back in there. So for me, I just don't think there's any rush for the Newcastle game. I think Danzo has done a fine job. And actually, the way he defended against Everton at the weekend is exactly what you're going to need in the opening 30 minutes against Newcastle, especially with that fucking beanpole Voltamata up front. You know, honestly, I think he's in the wrong sport, Jack. You should be contacting your NBA contacts and getting them involved with this guy, because he's a handful. Like, this guy's good in here, but he can also play. So for me, you need someone like Danzo, you know, that's just going to put his body on your line. Old school, no nonsense defender. That when that ball's coming towards the goal, you just see Danzo flying along with Superman on the front of his chest. You know, you just need somebody like that tomorrow. So I don't think there's any real rush to get Romero back in there tomorrow. I think you save him for the big game on the weekend against Chelsea.
Can I just give a shout out to Danzo there? He is slowly but surely becoming one of my favorite Spurs players. Talk about no nonsense, bread and butter, hard as nails, effective defender. I mean, when we signed him, I thought, he's a bit of a backup or whatever. And now I'm actually pleased to see him in the starting 11, because he just he does exactly what it says on the tin. He defends, and he defends well. And there was a stat I saw at some point after that match that he's more clearances or whatever. I genuinely can't remember. But
I think
there was
19 clearances.
Yeah, and no fouls. And it was the no fouls
fouls
part for me. I mean, that is, the measure of somebody who's doing what they're doing and doing it well. It's not by accident. It's, he's doing something repetitive. He's doing it very, very well, and he's getting it right all of the time in that match. Incredible. I'm delighted to see him pull on a Spurs shirt and get out there at the moment. He's certainly one of my little cult heroes.
Yeah.
It was probably petty of me to put this question in, so I left it out, but I wanted to maybe throw something in on, the scales of the Sanchez's to the Dyers to the many of the Longleys and whatnot of the world. I wonder where Kevin Danso might stack up actually against them, but we might leave that for another week with him getting more starts, and maybe when he gets phased out of the team with Romero coming back, we'll be able to we'll be able to have a conversation about that, because this is something I'm looking forward to, because I was racking my brain, in terms of backup center backs or rotational center backs that have been better than him. But he's got a few more games, though, to gather some more love from the Spurs fans. I'll throw this one at you, James, and I'll go around the panel on this as we're going maybe towards some of our last questions here. Frank, he found a solution to the creativity problem against Everton, where I agree with what was said earlier by Colin. Like, yes, we weren't amazing going forward, but we did look a lot better. And that might have been down to the fact that he made a slight formation change and slight shape change, with having Kudus taking more of a free role and pushing Johnson out to the right, and Xavi Simons playing a bit more of a free role, kind of tucked inside. Do you think he needs to do that against Newcastle, kind of go for something different than this 4-3-3 that we've seen lots of times?
I think it's important we have three midfielders, three solid midfielders. Like, I know I made the point earlier, but that is the key to Newcastle. Is if their midfield plays well, then they're going to play well. Sandro is an exceptional player. Joelinton is converted from a striker to a midfielder in recent years, and he's honestly exceptional as well. And Bruno G is one of. I mean, he scored a late winner against Fulham. I think you said you watched that game, Jack. Is also a brilliant player. So whatever we decide to do, I think it's important we have three strong midfielders. I don't think this game is made for Xavi Simons, certainly with a lack of confidence. I mean, he could easily be sidelined in this game if he was to start, and it would just be like playing with 10 men. And that's not disrespect to Xavi Simons. I just don't think it's the right game for him to get a confidence booster out of. I think you'd probably throw him in against Chelsea or Copenhagen would be the perfect game for him. But in terms of the tactics, I definitely think we need to exploit their fullbacks as much as possible. That's why I think Mohamed Kudus has to start this game 110%. I think Dave alluded to it. We need to take on the players on the sides, and I think it's really important that the fullbacks go forward and be brave at times, but also soak up the pressure to start with. And I think Pedro Porro is going to have a massive game, because he's got his question marks on him defensively. So yeah, I think offensively and defensively, it's a huge game for Pedro Porro. I think Jed Spence, his whole penitentiary or whatever it's called, that was out of action on Sunday, wasn't it? Because Iliman Ndiaye absolutely skinned him about 3 times. Didn't think he had a bad game, Jed Spence, but I think it's important that he screws his head on, because I think naturally he can come a bit unstuck in these games as well. So massive game for the fullbacks as well, mate. So I wouldn't change up. I wouldn't do anything drastic. At the end of the day, we're quite limited with our squad, so I'd keep it relatively similar to how we played against Everton. But as Dave alluded to a couple of times, it's super important we soak things up to start with, because they're going to absolutely batter us first half. I can see it happening right now, and that's not to say I'm very confident about this game. I spoke to Dave earlier. I'm not confident about this game one bit, but trying to be as optimistic as possible. If we can hold out for the first sort of 30 to 40 minutes, it's anyone's game, I think.
I think every Spurs fan's going to be nervous tomorrow, probably except for Soren and Dermatron, which is why we like to talk to them on game days. Dave, Ellie came in here quickly on this, so let's get to her. She's saying Yank owners in the Premier League, they want results, wins over style. I think you're on mute, maybe.
I was going to say, look, I'm not having a pop at Americans here or anything, but I think it's a fair argument. Like, you know me, Jack. I watch a lot of USA sports, and what they do at collegiate level and high school level and stuff like that. And when you look at their sports, segments of their colleges and their high schools and stuff, they're pumped full of money. It's all about, performances and stuff like that. And it's all about winning. That's just naturally the way America is, even when it comes to business. It's about winning, right? That's just the way sort of America is. My big thing about all these Americans coming in is it was the Morgan and Chase that were sort of ready to finance the European Super League, and I feel like they've rang up a lot of rich Americans and say start going to buy Premier League clubs, and because all the other owners were too weak to sort of push it through, you guys will, and that's how we're going to get our Super League. I think there's a bigger agenda at play, with all these American owners coming into buying Premier League clubs. And like I said, it's nothing against Americans. I really like American people. I like the winning culture that they set, and that there's no excuses for losing and stuff like that. So, but that's what I think's at play there with that. But when it comes to the formation, look, for me, it was a bit weird against Everton because out of possession, we defended with a back four, but then in possession, we went with a back three. Porro tucked in as a right-sided centre-back. Spence went high on the left. Xavi Simons and Sarr played as your two number 10s, or Sarr or Kudos played as your two number 10s very close to Mawani, with Johnson pushing high on the right. And for me, I would like him to replicate that, heading into this game. Same sort of formation out of possession, because I actually think it allowed us to get more bodies going forward than the 4-2-3-1 in possession when we're trying to play that. It had more passing options, more players going forward, and I think we looked a little bit better in possession because of it. And we had more players that could break forward and go and support the attack. And to be fair, I know, Jack said he has a problem with Rodrigo Bentancur passing sideways and stuff, but no one whipped out his pass map, from the weekend, because there was a lot of forward passes on it, and I think that alludes to, the fact that we had more options going forward. So Bentancur, had more people he could play it to personally. So for me, that's what I would like to see replicated, because I think coming into the Everton game, I said he needs to do something different in terms of changing up, in terms of going forward, because becoming 1-2-dimensional, very easy to play against, similar to Ange Postecoglou last season. I think when he changed it up against Everton, he gave them something to think about and something they struggled to get to grips with.
I really liked how he gave Kudus that free role, Jack, because I think in recent games we'd seen Kudus was getting practically quadruple marked, it felt like, where they just knew you take Kudus out the game on that right side, you sort of take Spurs out of the game, and they don't really have much of a hope of creating much of anything. So I think Thomas Frank found a way around that by giving him this free type role more through the center. Do you think he needs to do that against Newcastle?
Possibly. It's a good option to have, and you kind of saw him, he was drifting very wide at times and letting Johnson kind of push on beyond him. And I think Johnson's big strength is obviously attacking space in behind. Obviously back post tap-ins, that's Johnson's bread and butter, but if you pass into Johnson's feet, he's a disaster. But if you put the ball in behind, let him get into a foot race with the defender, I think he's very useful. But yeah, I think it gives the team something different to think about, because I think we became very predictable that over the top ball, power of the Kudus. Teams now, if you cut that off, we've absolutely nowhere to go in terms of progressing the ball. I think, as Dave said with the shape, just the 3-2-5 sort of build up just meant Spence was high and wide rather than tucked in beside. I think kind of that meant that Xavi wasn't as isolated as well. I think it meant he actually picked the ball up in those pockets where, even if it wasn't clicking for him, I think it just meant that going forward, maybe in games where it does click for him, he had a couple where he found that pocket of space and then was able to play a ball into Kudus, who was probably within 10 yards of him to his right. And I think there was the James Garner foul, which I thought was a dreadful challenge. I thought he was lucky to stay on the pitch, and Kudus was probably lucky not to be injured from it. And that was a free kick in a dangerous area. And there was another similar one as well. I think that was also to Kudus, very similar situation. I think that kind of, you saw that same sort of progression, and it just means that you're not constantly relying on that same over the top ball to Kudus, or that kind of progression down the left hand side, where when you have Jed Spence in the team, he's fairly limited in his angles. He's always looking to go backwards rather than down the line, because teams now they can just cut him off now that he's right footed. So I just think it's good to have variety. I think not everything worked perfectly at the weekend, but it was good to see him just do something different, I guess, even if it didn't click. But even the two defensive midfielders in that double pivot, they actually were looking for forward passes, even if I think Paulinho had a few maybe that were a bit loose, but I'd rather him pass forward and maybe only 50% of them find a teammate than just passing sideways and 90% of them find a teammate. I just think that positivity was just good to see at the weekend, even if it didn't click perfectly.
I feel like having Kudus through the middle again would not be a bad idea against or just again, like we're talking about more of a formation change, really.
Yeah.
Like it seemed like it's just a whole different shape. Because I think freeing up Kudus does just help Spurs out a ton because he is the only guy at times that, like we were saying, can have the legs to drag us up the pitch, but then is the one where you can rely on him to have more quality in and around the box with either a good pass or a good link up with somebody. And then can also, as we brought up earlier, we do live off free kicks and dead balls, and he's the one that can get us corners, can get us set pieces, can get us fouls to sort of ease ourselves into the game. So I think you're getting Kudus on the ball as much as possible in this game with time and space to make things happen is how you can hurt this Newcastle's team. I'm a bit worried that Frank will have to go with something similar again, because if you go with Kudus wide, far out on the right, it's almost just way too easy to stop Spurs because any manager, I mean, the Monaco manager even figured it out, right? Like, and he was only in the job for like 2 days and he was able to figure out, you know, put 2-3 players tucked over to that side, make it impossible for him to do much of anything. And then just trust that the rest of the players up front, Richarlison, I think it was that game, and Odegaard, unfortunately, they're not going to do very much really. And I think knowing Eddie Howe, he's a good manager. I rate Eddie Howe. He also has the cheerleader on the side of him, Jason Tyndall. They'll probably be looking at doing something a bit similar to the Monaco manager and many managers of the past. So I think you do have to give Kudus this free Maverick-esque role where you just kind of allow him to float wherever. And you can't really stop a player if they are given that. You just have to find someone that might man mark him, but you're not going to be able to double team, quadruple mark him like they have done when he's just sitting on the sideline like in the recent game. So I think you might have to go for something similar.
That is a big problem for Spurs at the minute. If Kudus gets marked out of the game or isn't in good form, where does it come from?
Right.
There's just nobody else. Nobody else of sufficient quality, which is why I would advocate Sarr. I know that Xavi is meant to be that creative. He's just not there yet. You need to give him time, more time. And that's why, Sarr can certainly hit a shot. It's so important the Kudus plays, like we said earlier. His delivery from set pieces and corners is just wicked. But we need somebody running at Newcastle to give them a headache.
Yeah. Completely agree. I think we just had one last question. We're going to wrap things up here. Is this going to be the toughest challenge yet for Thomas Frank? Just to simply put one, is this maybe his most difficult game, the one that he might be judged on the most? Is this Newcastle game, or is it the Chelsea game on the weekend? I'll go to you, James. I'll go around the horn on this one.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think for sure it's tomorrow. To be honest with you, I think it's in your thumbnail. Frank's biggest test. I think it is. Obviously, Man City was seen to be a tough challenge. We overcame it very comfortably. PSG in the Super Cup, I don't really count that. It's kind of not really the proper season. I think in terms of the general season, I think you lose this game and you lose it very poorly, then you get the divide in that fan base again. I think it's kind of delayed the civil war in the fan base, the result on Sunday, a little bit. That's why it was so big, because I remember coming on here a couple of weeks ago and we were looking at the running and we're thinking Chelsea at home, not sure about that game. Man United at home, not sure about that game. Arsenal away. You start to think maybe we're not even going to get many points in the next sort of month or 6 weeks. And that's why it's super important that we stay in this cup competition, because it is our best chance of winning a trophy. It is our best chance of silverware. Like, you've got to be realistic with this. Premier League, we're not going to win the Premier League. We're not going to win the Champions League. Okay, we might go on some good runs and we might get top 4 or top 6. But other than the FA Cup, the Carabao Cup is the best chance we have. It's like, and I go back to the Fulham game, 2023 under Ange Postecoglou, where we made 9 changes out of the 11. And we essentially threw that game. We lost on penalties. And Ange Postecoglou got some serious pelters just months into his tenure there. And it's a similar situation, right? If Thomas Frank makes 6 changes and we lose the game, suddenly you've got question marks over the manager. Suddenly you've got question marks over this project. And I know that sounds unrealistic and a bit out there, but it is super important that we take this really, really seriously for me. I don't think we should be resting players where we can't. We should be putting out a serious 11. We should be putting out a serious performance. And if we lose going out fighting, fine. But if we don't put in a good performance, suddenly there's going to be a very, very toxic environment in the Tottenham fan base for me.
I agree. I agree. I think it's a very important, not just these 2 fixtures in isolation. The whole month ahead, you've got Arsenal coming up, the North London Derby. You've got Newcastle away again in the league. You've got Man United coming up as well. So we've got a very tricky month ahead of us. And for me, look, I'm not sure whether it's going to define Thomas Frank at Tottenham Hotspur, but I certainly think, it will. Fans will ask questions if this month doesn't go right. But for me, I think, look, I've accepted we are what we are with the lack of quality across the front line until we get players back injured and stuff like that. Every game is going to be a dogfight. Every game is just going to be like that naturally because we don't have the craft or the creativity on the football pitch. But I think it will definitely determine what we are this season. Are we good enough to go and take points off some of the big teams and go and compete for top four? Or are we just competing for Europa League or Europa League conference spaces? Or are we just sort of a mid-table team? I think this will sort of really define what we are. But also, my big question around Thomas Frank was at Brentford. He went out of the Carabao Cup nearly first round every single time. And also, his ability to be able to manage Europe. He's never done that before. My big question around Thomas Frank was, when these fixtures come in and around this period, does he have the ability to handle it? And I think there's many people out there that had, the same sort of question marks around it, where we're about to find out. And at the end of the day, at Tottenham Hotspur, we're not a team that should be prioritising. We're a team that need to be able to sustain these fixture lists, to be able to continue to challenge for trophies and all. That's where we want to go as a fan base. That's where the Lewis family want to take this club. And Thomas Frank also has to demonstrate the ability that he can come out of this, still in a good position in the league, still in the Carabao Cup, still in with a chance of getting out into the next knockout stage of the Champions League. Because if he doesn't, then like James says, all of a sudden, you will get a section of the fan base that will pop up and start asking questions, and the more results don't go right, the more people are going to start, falling on that side of the opinion. So I think this next month is absolutely huge for Thomas Frank. But like I've said with other managers, I would hope smarter heads prevail and realise until we give these managers, the pieces of the puzzles that Liverpool's and City's and Chelsea's and that are giving their managers. If we want to go and compete, at some point you have to show a guy a bit of patience and let us build on it. And hopefully off the back of summer transfer window, there's more transfer windows like that to come, which then will give these managers an opportunity. So I think for me, it's not really going to define Thomas Frank, but I think it will sort of Spurs fans will have more clarity on their head on exactly what sort of team and how competitive we're going to be this year coming out of it.
I think I agree with most of that. I think context, again, is everything. In a year's time, if Frank is still here and we have this exact same match, but we're comfortable with what Frank does, we're comfortable with the way we're playing, and we're comfortable with the results that are coming through, and we lose to Newcastle, and you go out of the Carabao Cup, you go, disappointing, but we move on, right? Now, he's so early in his tenure. Now, because we've got a 50-50 kind of fan base, I would put myself in that camp as well. If he loses, and just to echo what Jack said, what James said, if we lose with our head held high, I can kind of take it. If we turn in another Monaco, we turn in another Bournemouth. It was Bournemouth, wasn't it? That's shocking, terrible, depressing looking, energyless, just abject displays. I can't take it. And I mean, I think I'd be kind of like, does he know what he's doing then? Even though that's a really reactionary and not really my style. I'm sure I'll be calm. I'll need an hour after the match. But I cannot emphasize enough. For those who are undecided, for those who are not really sure, for all of those people out there who just can't make up their mind where they want to be on Thomas Frank, this is probably the one. Never mind Chelsea. I know I emphasize that. You can probably take a loss in the league without it having the massive impact. I know we're fighting for 4th, 5th, and 6th or whatever. But you lose this one, I just feel like, especially with our away form being as good as it is, if he calls that team wrong, if he gets it wrong, there'll be a lot of fallout.
No, I definitely agree there. I think we'll finish up with some members' comments and members' questions. We had one from Rain Man, and I'm going to maybe have Dave answer it to begin with, because I think he's talking about the game ahead here. He's saying, would the panelists pick their best players and then try and get the players into a decent shape, or have a standard set of tactics that the players have to be adapted into? I'm concerned that the next bandwagon is going to be a back three because of Danzo, when a back two has just been working just fine. Dave, I think he's talking about the Newcastle game.
Yeah. Look, I'm not a fan of a back five, but at the end of the day, I can sort of see it, right? Van der Ven, Romero, and Danzo as your 3 centre backs. That way you still have Danzo, in your team available with the long throws. you can push, Pedro Porro to the right-hand side, which means he can get high and wide. How many Spurs fans have said they want to see him further up the pitch or potentially given an opportunity as a right winger? You can have Spencer Udogie pushing high and wide the other side, and then that way you can keep Bentancur and Paulini, and then you can play Xavi and Kudus in your 2 number 10s, Mawani up front. And I think, until we get the likes of Kulusevski back, Maddison back, and players like that, I think if Frank wants to look better in possession and, be able to carve teams open in possession while remaining competitive, I think it's certainly a way to do it. Like, I like what I saw against Everton. We had more players breaking forward. You had your 2 wingers, 2 or 3 players breaking through the middle to support the striker, and we just had more passing options. And for me, I think, it's the way forward right now until we get some of our better players back from injury.
Yeah. And then as well, we're going to take some of these from Dropkick Your Teacher. No reason to apologize for your lack of donor, lack of burger toppings. I just thought the burger was more crazy than not getting the donor, but we'll take some of these thoughts from his. We all love Sonny, but I failed to see what benefit he would bring. If he came back on loan, he wouldn't add to the issue on the wing, or he wouldn't fix the issue, or he wouldn't add or fix the issue. So that's just his opinion. I think we definitely covered that in the beginning. And he's saying at this point, Richie and Johnson need to be moved on. They aren't getting better. They actually look worse. What happened to Johnson being there at the back post? He's now useless and has got saved by us beating Everton. Otherwise, he would have gotten ripped apart. Jack, I'll throw this one at you because we, don't know your opinions on every single player. Where James, Dave, and I, we talk to each other quite a lot. So, what are your thoughts on Johnson or Richarlison?
I think Richarlison's a real shame. I just think injuries have really caught up to him. I think he looks physically just completely shot. Even the way he runs, it's like he's trying not to get injured. And you can understand that mentality that last season he'd get like 3 or 4 games, pull his calf, pull his hamstring, pull his quad, whatever it was. His body would just break down. And I was at the Leeds away game, and the amount of times that he wouldn't get back on side, I've never seen anything like it. And they pumped the ball long, he'd be offside, and he just couldn't play the ball. I think that's just detrimental. I think he's still useful as maybe if you're just putting crosses into the box, but in terms of hold up play or any sort of running, he's not there anymore. And I think it's just a shame how many injuries he got. And I think he nearly sacrificed his body to keep Everton in the league. I remember hearing he got 10 pain injections a week just to play for Everton when they were in a relegation battle. And I think it's kind of caught up with him now. And then Johnson, I think we'll always remember him for Bilbao, but in terms of his technical level, I just don't think it's good enough. And any game he doesn't score, he's just a complete passenger. Although at the weekend, I haven't re-watched the game. I thought he was actually slightly better than when I watched. I thought he was really bad live, but there was actually one time where he took on Mikalenko and beat him. Now, I don't know if that says more about Mikalenko than Johnson, that maybe he literally can't defend at all if Johnson's gone past them. But yeah, I think that those two and maybe a few other guys, maybe Dragusin if he comes back and doesn't hit the ground running. I think with Vuskovic coming in, I think he'll probably need to be moved on. Yeah. Maybe Vicario, depending on how he goes the rest of the season, I think you could probably look to upgrade him. And I think, it's probably one to assess at the end of the season with other guys, but I'm sure there'll be plenty of guys by the end of the season you'll go, they're either good enough or not good enough. I know a lot of the younger guys, Tell and Otterbear, people speak on that. I think they probably deserve at least next season, provided they kick on a little bit this season. You're only expecting them to be backups, really. But these guys that Richarlison, Johnson, that they're senior players in the squad, and both of them seen their places taken by Tell and Otterbear this season. I think that maybe says a lot about them, that people are so critical of those two, but they're getting starts over Richarlison and Johnson, who are, I think Johnson's 24, Richarlison 28. You expect them to be in their prime, and they're having their places taken by 2 20-year-olds, which a lot of the fan base think are actually quite underwhelming. So I think that's obviously a great concern. If you get 20 million a pop for them, I'd be happy enough with that in the summer, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said there, Jack. Just as we're wrapping up, I'll let you take whatever you felt like, you want to say on Johnson or Richarlison there, Colin.
Not a Johnson fan at all. We'll remember him for Bilbao as the best way I think we'll ever put it. And I still, to this day, when I watch the replays, can't see how we make contact with the ball.
I don't think he did. That's my conspiracy theory. But
he definitely didn't.
It's a glitch in the
League final decided by an own goal, can they? That'd be a UEFA spectacle, wouldn't it?
No, absolutely. Yeah. So for me, to answer what happened to Johnson being there at the back post, clearly a change in tactics where we're not trying to overwhelm teams or running straight at them, winger to winger. That's the reason why he's not scoring those type of goals anymore. He just never strikes me. It's terrible to say this about a young man. He just never strikes me as the cleverest guy. He just seems antagonistic. Jack, I might have to rewatch the game because I was with you when I watched it live. I just thought, he's playing right into the stereotype that I've put him into in my head.
Yeah.
Enough about Johnson. Just on Richarlison. Love the fact that he puts it out there all the time. For me right now, he's just simply certainly in his recent history, uncharted territory because he has never played this many games without falling over injured. So he normally plays 3 or 4 games. He looks fantastic, which he did for 3 or 4 games. And then suddenly he's like, whoops, I haven't been injured. Now what do I do? It's almost like he doesn't know what to do now that he's actually retained his fitness and been uninjured for an extended period of time. I would just be keeping my fingers crossed that he just kind of finds it again. But I think the reality is that he's probably had his day. He just, if you can't find it in the next kind of 2 or 3 games at his age, at his level, he's an international, plenty of experience. If he's not, showing the signs that he's about to hit the ground running again, then for me, he's gone. He's, back to Everton with you.
Yeah, I agree with.
But I do love him. I just want to qualify that. I love him to bits. I just think, he's a wholehearted player, and I can't ask any more of anyone than that. Just to go out and give everything that they've got, and so that we can hold our heads high when we walk into work the next day.
That's totally fair.
Yeah, sorry. Just one more point on Johnson as well. I think just his lack of intensity out of possession is really bad. I don't think it's any coincidence he was one of the very few players last season not to pick up a serious injury. I think he looks disinterested when he's pressing sometimes. I just think he jogs. He's always a yard or 2 back from where you'd expect him to be. And when you're pressing, if one guy's off of it, you're going to get killed, I think. Yeah. And it's not like he's Mo Salah, where he's been told by his manager, well, we know you're going to get 40 goals a season, and when it comes down to it, you're going to be brilliant in the final third. Like, he's not a good enough player to carry out of possession. So I just think his lack of intensity on top of it is just another issue that he has on top of all the other various issues.
to that point, I mean, go back and look what he done against Everton. He stood 10 yards behind Pedro Porro, replicating his movements rather than actually going and getting pressure on Jack Grealish and doubling up. And that's a huge problem. You go back to Man City last year, he fell down, pulled down a move. The ball ended up in the back of our own net, out of possession. He's absolutely shocking. He's only 24, so I don't understand why he doesn't have the sort of tank in him to be able to get up and down. At the end of it, that's what's expected of you as a winger. Look, both guys just need to be moved on, January or the summer if we can get in if there's better on the market for sure.
And then I think he's just agreeing with you about Danzo being different to the defenders nowadays. So they just jockey backwards and don't actually put in the challenges. So I think he's just agreeing with you there, and really appreciate your support. Artist T, we're wrapping things up here. He always likes to ask people, though, what they're having for dinner. I'll go around the horn on this one. And also, please, everybody, subscribe over to James's channel. James, what's for dinner, and anything to plug on the channel?
Yeah, always interested, isn't it? I saw the doner kebab debate in the WhatsApp earlier. That was an interesting morning read. For dinner, we've got a little easy one tonight. Lack of time, so a little pizza, a little hot honey and pepperoni pizza.
Nice.
With a bit of salad on the side. Can't be dodging that these days. Thanks for having me on, lads. Really enjoyed it. Pleasure to meet you, boys. I feel very outnumbered on the Irish sense, although, to be fair, Jack on the American side. But no, pleasure with all of you. Thanks for having me on. And you can find me over at Spurs Related. I've just put up a predicted lineup video for the game tomorrow, discussing sort of what we've just said there about who should be the changes for what is a very important game. So go and check that out. It's only 8 minutes. Like to do shorter little videos that are easy to watch and hopefully informative as well. So thanks for having me on again, boys.
Absolutely. Great job, James. As always, good to have you with us on a regular basis. And Colin, pleasure to meet you. Thought you did a great job tonight. Anything planned for dinner?
Yes. Well, I've been very lucky, and the wife was busy earlier on in the kitchen. So I was the grateful recipient of a baked potato with baked beans and some grated cheese. And it was delicious. So I'm well nourished. Thank you very much indeed. And
I'll have an invite to that one next time, lad.
You're not far away, Dave. You can come over. I'll get you a baked potato. So thank you very much for allowing me to make my my debut. I very much enjoyed it. Nothing to plug other than you guys.
No, great job. And I think Dave is jealous. I know he's a big Spud Bro fan. That's kind of sounds like something you could get from that truck of theirs. Jack, good to have a fellow Jack on the panel. Anything left to say tonight that maybe you didn't get to, and dinner plans?
No, nothing really left to say, but dinner, much like Colin, I've already had my dinner. I've made chicken with rice, put a bit of paprika and cayenne pepper, and then a little drop of cream into it just to cool it down a bit. So that
very fancy.
Parmesan cheese as well on top. So yeah, very, very fancy.
Where'd you learn to cook, lad?
Yeah, similar Jack's here in terms of taste.
I did a week-long cooking camp when I was about 12, and I've managed to keep a few things up. So,
for play.
I was going to say, I thought we had Heston Blumenthal on the panel.
I'm on a cooking podcast at 9:00.
He's got a bigger one, Gordon's. No, but actually similar taste profile that you and I seem to have here. Dave, dinner plans?
Yeah, no, I'm just going for an old staple: chicken pie and chips, brown sauce, brilliant.
Nice. Class, very, very
class.
Straight to the point.
Later, I think that's the pudding, isn't it? Pasting on FIFA as the pudding. That's what I heard as well.
Yeah,
you're the one that usually on the receiving end of the beating, James. So
very, very nice. Well, everybody, thanks for being here with us. Really do appreciate the support. Thanks to I believe Ellie as well for the super chat, as well as John Stokes for the member milestone. Join us all tomorrow for the Newcastle game pre-match build-up. Check out Dave's predicted lineup that will be out tomorrow as well, and join us for the watch along. We will see you next time. Come on, you Spurs! Big test for Thomas Frank tomorrow, and the Slim Frank we trust. See you, everybody.
Coys.